All right, let's do a little bit of a breakdown of the NATO situation here. We've got Donald Trump recently telling Vladimir Putin, inviting him with open arms to freely attack any NATO allies that don't live up to the expectations of Donald J. Trump himself, because he says what's good and what's bad. There is a root of truth to his argument, and the very, very small modicum of truth there is simple. There is 18 allies in NATO that spend about 2% or more. And the allies are all supposed to pitch in to actually fund the defense of every NATO country in the alliance. Many of the countries can't afford to do it. A lot of those countries don't have a lot of activity going on, so they're paying for something they may need in the future. So we need to keep that in mind as well. But most of the financial burden lands on European allies, Canada, and of course the United States. This has been an argument and a sticking point for a lot of people for a long time, and it's valid to a point. But looking at the big picture, we need to understand one thing. For instance, the situation with Ukraine right now. The NATO allies that are pitching in right now to defend Ukraine, and like Europe, the UE, and also the United States, helping to defend them because they were invaded by Russia. This is the reason Russia wanted the U.S. out of NATO. This is why he pushed Donald Trump to pull the U.S. out of NATO. And the fact that some of these countries can't afford to pay more is looked at blanket across the board. They're dereliction, so they deserve, the United States, the biggest financier, to leave. When the fact of the matter is, this is what keeps the balance of peace worldwide. NATO countries are kind of super protected because of this. This is why Ukraine wanted to become a NATO country right out of the gate, and it's also the reason why they weren't openly invited in right out of the gate, because it's a very volatile area. We kind of knew Russia was going to do what they're doing now, and that is, I believe, the reason why they weren't welcomed into NATO. Having said that, our assistance in Ukraine defending itself against Russia is very, very important. We are giving them money to defend themselves. No American boots on the ground. We're giving them essentially old military equipment that was just sitting there we weren't really using anyway, plus we're giving them money. Now, how much would it cost if we let Russia take over Ukraine and basically allowed Russia to conquer Ukraine and take it back? The next step Russia would take is invading a NATO alliance, invading an ally. Then the United States and all of the other countries involved in NATO will be sending soldiers, boots on the grounds, and billions of additional funding to continuously fight off an invasion of a NATO country. We need to keep the balance here. So sending $90 billion, $95 billion to Ukraine is nothing compared to a 10 or 20-year war like Afghanistan, like Iraq was for a long time. All of those places where we just kept losing hundreds and hundreds or thousands and thousands of U.S. soldiers and innocent civilians and everything else will be on the table right after Ukraine if we don't help Ukraine protect itself. Right now, Ukraine has successfully decreased the military power of Russia by 90% with their soldiers. 90%. That is insane. And we did that just by helping them defend themselves. Now, if you're telling me, or you're trying to make the stand that that's not a worthwhile investment for the future of not only the United States, but also the future of this country, it's also protecting the soldiers in the United States military, because they do not have to go over there and fight right now. But if we pull back our support of Ukraine, they will. And it will not be one country that's protected by NATO, especially with the teaser put out by Donald Trump, cordially inviting his friend Uncle Vladdy to attack at will. You tell me what's going to be more expensive. Try and explain to me why not helping Ukraine now is a better investment for our future. You tell me, explain to me why if we don't send aid to Ukraine and they get taken over by Russia, everything's just going to be fine. Because the very next step, again, I repeat, will be a NATO country, and then we will be involved directly. Here we're writing a check. Now compare that to Israel. Israel was invaded, attacked. 1,200 people were killed, 160 some odd hostages. Israel's defense of themselves against Hamas, again, puppets indirectly of Russia. Hamas funded by Iran, Iran funded and informed by Russia. This is all tied in. Israel has bombed from top to bottom Gaza, has been telling Palestinian civilians to go south, go to this place, this is a safe haven, go to this refugee camp, it's protected. And over this last week, Reza, I forget, I don't know how to pronounce that, I apologize, the final frontier of a refugee camp was massively bombed. This is the last space the Palestinians had to run to. This is where they were told they would be safe. And it was bombed over the last week. Over 100 people dead. They don't count the dead in Gaza until they're identified. So there's a hell of a lot more people that were killed. But they won't count on the tally until there's a name put to them, if there is ever a name put to them. This was supposed to be where they were safe. Now we are funding Israel. The Republicans are funding Israel with no guardrails, no holds barred. Do what you want, here's the check. Yet they're fighting the funding of Ukraine, who is currently being invaded over and over and over again by a hostile power trying to take over their country. Israel was attacked once. You tell me why Joe Biden's defense of the people of Palestine trying to restrict the actions of the Israel military and withholding funding from Israel that was rejected by the Republicans, forced through by the Republicans, so once again a blank check there, but they're trying to block Ukraine. Israel has a surplus. Israel is in better financial shape than the United States. And we're pissed off about Ukrainian spending. We're pissed off about sending money to Ukraine to defend themselves from an ongoing invasion by a hostile power. And that invasion will directly lead to boots on the ground of American soldiers and NATO ally soldiers worldwide if it's not stopped. So you tell me again what's fair and where we should be sending our money and what countries we should be supporting. Israel needs to stop blindly bombing innocent Palestinians. They are not Hamas. Hamas is in the tunnels underneath what's getting blown up. The tunnels are underneath the civilians, the innocent civilians. Over 27,000 children have been killed. Over 100,000 Palestinians has been killed. And you tell me what's right and wrong. Personally, I'd rather take the Israeli money and send it to Palestine, send it to Gaza. That's where I'd like to see that money go. To protect the Palestinians in Gaza. And tell Netanyahu, to stop blindly bombing civilians and withhold every freaking penny until he stops. There's not much left of Gaza. From top to bottom. Civilians were told to go to one area, and then days later that area was bombed. Now the final area, the final refuge, the final refugee camp was bombed. Think about that. We got to support Ukraine and support NATO. That keeps the balance.